Hi, everybody. It's the show with Ron. And today I want to talk about a country. It's not mentioned on a lot of the big news aggregation sites out there. It's not really mentioned that much at all in the international media, but there's interesting news that's coming out of there. This is the country of Myanmar, formerly known as Burma. You might remember it as that, as it's a country, like I say, rarely mentioned. It's to the west of Thailand. It has a kind of rich and depressing history in the 20th century that has put it among the world's least developed nations and one of the most depressive. It's often mentioned right alongside North Korea. So all I'll say is the last couple of years ago, there was a coup. There was a very nascent democracy that started up during President Barack Obama's presidency, where Myanmar just started to have a democracy. It was a limited democracy. The elected government had very little control over some parts of the country. The military, which has always been a big thing in Myanmar, was essentially still in control. And that lasted for a few years. Then they had elections. The military parties lost the elections, and the military took over. And since then, a very big, a civil war has erupted in that country in the last couple of years. Now, that country has always been sort of balkanized. Each section of Myanmar is about, it's similar in size to the U.S. state of Texas. U.S. state of Texas is huge, bigger than a lot of countries out there. So Myanmar is a very big place. It's a conglomeration of a lot of little ethnic enclaves. Each of those enclaves has historically had their own military insurgency that has fought against the central government, that have had their rebellions, that have at times cooperated with the central government in ceasefires, and as other times they've operated as sort of drug lords. So what we have now in the past couple of years, there's been a coordinated sort of civil war against the post-coup military rulers, where now almost all of Myanmar's external borders are now controlled by these regional ethnic groups. And the latest thing here we have is Mayawadi, the city on the border just to the west of the Thai town of Mae Sot, has fallen to Karen forces, which is the group that's in control there. And this is one of their major trade routes, another humiliation for the government. Now, I have seen some videos on YouTube where they talk about the situation and they say, well, that the central government in Myanmar is very close to the Chinese government and blah, blah, and they kind of leave it at that. But that really misses what actually happened in the last couple of years. It's believed that China was tacitly helping out some of these ethnic groups along its borders to pressure the central government. And that was because the central government was not acting on these big scam call centers that Myanmar was allowed to exist within their borders that targeted Chinese citizens. So instead of just Myanmar being a big ally of the Chinese government, it seems like the thought is that the weaponry that some of these groups have gotten on its borders are because China allowed it and was putting on pressure to close those call centers. And those call centers did get shut down by the rebels who were successful. Now, I just wanted to point this out, Mayawadi. I kind of Sometimes I like to make fun of articles. Here's an article, Why the Fall of Mayawati, Myanmar's Gateway to Thailand is So Important. You can read this article and it doesn't explain why it's so important. There is one line later on, and I guess this is what they mean. It just says, trade is desperately needed by an economy. It's taken a beating. But anyway, it's just, we got a few lines from a reporter from a country nobody really cares about in an area no one cares about. And nobody cares about Myanmar because, for many reasons, but one, they never aggressively went after nuclear power like North Korea did. North Korea is a player because they got nukes. Myanmar is not a player because they don't. They had a very little program, but they gave it up when they turned over to democracy in the mid-2010s. But okay, so we have the idea that China is over there, did cooperate somewhat with the rebels to close those call centers, but that doesn't mean that really China or maybe any other country really wants to have the country break apart. And as part of that, we see here is. You see the great powers, the big countries, the geopolitical states that everybody hears about. They're interested in tiny little country things like this, where there's a cross-border dispute, there's a fight between two countries, or maybe supply chains could be disrupted by something happening in that country. But if a country like Myanmar is just having a civil war, the big powers, the media doesn't really care. So here we have something where the media, Reuters has this little article about the Thai PM saying the Myanmar regime is losing strength. Now, as we say, normally there's not much news about some little countries in mainstream media. They're just not as important. But this article got in there, and here we have the Thai PM making this statement, and you can be sure you see at this level of heads of state, the Thai PM was not just sitting there just randomly speculating or just saying, he wasn't just, he was asked about the situation and he gave an honest assessment. Of course not. This is a signal. This is a signal to the world, and it's a signal to the Myanmar regime that everybody needs to come to the negotiating table, because particularly the West, the United States, would not want to see a Myanmar that's broken into pieces. Now, the Myanmar people might want freedom and democracy and to get rid of their evil military, but the U.S. has a geopolitical reason. You see, if Myanmar were balkanized, if the little sections broke off from one another, maybe China could make separate deals with those little tiny states on their border. Maybe they could have a cooperation, and this would be an inroad of China or something else into Myanmar. It's much better for the international community to maintain what they call the federal state. So you have some limited autonomy to all of these areas that have ethnic groups that have broken off and successfully fought their way free of the military, of the central military, but they want the foreign policy and the overall government to still be held centrally. Now, I mean, to outsiders, to just someone who watches it and wants people to be able to have freedom and not have their legitimate vote overturned by the military, you'd say, oh, let's get rid of that military once and for all. And I know a lot of people within Myanmar feel that the same way. And here was an article, foreign peacemakers are back, but at least one thing, Myanmar, last thing Myanmar needs is more white messiahs. So this is also, everyone is aware of what's happening, is that as the central government is more and more constrained into the central area, lost all their border control, that perhaps there's a momentum going, and the Western powers do not want to see the military to be completely overthrown and the present state dissolved for some new something nobody knows about. Of course, a lot of countries, the U.S. is included, have learned hard lessons from their adventures in Afghanistan and Iraq and Libya, in just saying, "Oh, we just overthrow the present state, and people will dance in the streets, and everyone will want to be democratic." Things don't all. You just cannot see what the future will be when you overturn that initial steady state. So this article is, this is from somebody within Myanmar who actually cares about Myanmar for Myanmar, and doesn't want a last minute negotiation to snatch victory away in this civil war. And they make the point here where, the previous international negotiations and tons of money and trade that was poured into the democratic Myanmar in the years just right before the recent coup didn't change the military, didn't change the system. That their system was unable to grow out of that authoritarianism that had been there for many decades. We've seen this around the world with a lot of countries, either isolated countries or big countries like Russia. We thought after the fall of the Soviet Union and supposed democracy that we could link Russia in with a lot of international agreements and trade agreements and have them supply the fuel oil or gas to Europe for their energy needs. It'd link everybody together. They'd be happy. It didn't protect Europe from Russia, and so who knows what's going to happen here in Myanmar. And quite the conventional wisdom there. Sometimes I see stuff that's written by people who are supposed to be experts. And they don't even realize the situation of China supposedly cooperating with some of the rebel groups in the early days of this rebellion. So we're just back to conventional wisdom. I don't know what the authors of this know, but the conventional wisdom anyway is that it is very difficult to overturn that entrenched state, and Myanmar military will win out if they just hold on. So the one thing I wanted to say about the Thai PM is, we have a new democratically elected government, not really, in Thailand somewhat, that the party that won was unable to take control. And that's a whole nother video. So, we have a government in Thailand that is, it's part of the old Thaksin clique of people who would be close to the United States. They're engaging very closely with Cambodia. That feeds into what the United States wants, to pull Cambodia out of being what it almost is, which is a de facto Chinese colony. And they're doing some heavy lifting for the international community here, sending the signals out to Myanmar and all the parties that the international community, the white messiahs, as we've just heard about, want this negotiated before it becomes chaotic or the central government might fall entirely. And I have a book about remote places myself. Disillusioned by the promises of the modern world, young people make their way to Bangkok and then on to the furthest places they can find. There are still unknown places. And I just heard my book is now available at Kinokuniya branches at M Quarter, Central World, and Siam Paragon. I really wanted them to carry it, and it's in literature, which is cool, so this is another dream come true for me. Read it and let me know what you think, please. Thanks. That's Myanmar. I go back to that country every once in a while because normally on this channel we focus on the big headlines that are being presented to us by the news aggregation sites and what they might mean and what the context is, but there's some countries that just fly below the radar. Myanmar's one of them, And that's the latest on Myanmar. I'll see you next time. Please like and subscribe. I'm trying to grow this channel. Bye-bye.